A few years before the current jail was built and filled, there was a study that the county commissioned that looked at our incarceration needs as a county. And what that study said was not only that we didn't need a larger facility for our needs at the time, but that by the year 2000, and keep in mind this is 1982 or 1983, by the year 2000 our incarceration needs as a county would only be between 40 and 60 inmates. And right around the time that Monroe County started engaging in this conversation in the early 1980s, that was happening nationally as well. And the United States began this crazy project of investing tons of money and tons of people into incarceration, to the point that now, and we're still doing it, we're by far the world's largest incarcerator, right? In sheer numbers and per capita. Our 2.3, 2.4 million people who we lock up are 25% of the world's incarcerated population. And of course, as we all know, incarceration, it affects all of us, but it disproportionately affects just some of us, right? Poor people, folks of color, right? Pretty much always. The capacity then, it was originally built for 125 people. It's been double bunked, and so now the capacity is 267. And on any given day, there's maybe 300 or so people who are there, often sleeping, I just heard actually under the stairwell, in large common spaces, sometimes in the showers. Okay, they're talking about probably doubling, I would say at this point, the capacity of the jail. We've heard between 400 and 500 new beds. What's sort of in front of us is this proposal for what they're calling a justice campus, okay? To be built on 85 acres off South Rogers Street on the old RCA Thompson site. The proposal would probably cost somewhere between $30 and $60 million just to build.
We talked about the fact that the high cost of incarceration versus the much lower cost of alternative programming, drug treatment, things like that. And the fact that in this economic crisis, we really just can't afford to build this new jail.
Right now, on any given day, and this is according to Judge Galvin, who is the juvenile judge here, on any given day, there's only about 7 youth who are locked up from the county. Okay, so we're talking about building a whole new facility for a handful of youth. And thus far, as Hal Taylor likes to say, this has essentially been a bricks and mortar conversation, right? It's been about the construction costs, the building. No one has talked about the education needs, the counseling needs, the empowerment needs of our youth, or our adults for that matter. Okay.
Our group came up with the issue of making sure that we focus on forms of continual support. 75% of the people who are in Monroe County Jail are there for drug and alcohol related concerns, and there's a 75% recidivism rate. So we should consider that.
Changing how long the felonies on the record, or employers simply not asking if someone's done the time and served their probation, that was it. They no longer ask so people can actually get jobs without having to lie on the employment forms. Outpatient drug treatment, mental health, transition job and housing, and halfway house. Less arrests for some drug use like marijuana, and no financial rewards for more arrests. Restorative justice, victim offender mediation. That seems to reduce recidivism. Plus, it keeps them from being in jail too, if you can get that going.
Parents, mothers who need contact visits with their children, to really have places to do that are humane, that aren't degrading, and that aren't demeaning.
Bobby Summers. I am the executive director of Martha's House, and in looking at our stats this year, over 45% of the people we served were coming out of prison or coming out of our local jail. One of the things in working with the population that I have strongly felt is that we are a very punitive society, that people go to prison or to jail for a crime, and they pay for it for the rest of their lives. They can't get work, they have to get substandard jobs, they can't find housing, and they're really stuck in the streets. They're very vulnerable, and so as a consequence, we breed possibly people who do end up in desperation having to commit other crimes.
Can we move this toward, instead of the politicians making these decisions, more of community members? I know you guys said you've been working on this for years, but I mean, who are you including in that conversation?
The thing that really frightens me, though, are the decision makers. You know, I'm over here trying to run the only game in town for children, and I'm not adequately funded for 2009 because they're just, I don't know why. The money mechanism is there, but people don't have the moral courage or the wherewithal to fund what we have, which to me is quite an indictment on our community and our elected officials.
We're fourth in the country in terms of how many youth we incarcerate, and we're in the mid-40s in terms of how much we spend in terms of social welfare on our youth. Okay, so we're right at the top in terms of how many youth we incarcerate, and we're right at the bottom in terms of the amount we spend on things like YSB and other social welfare programs for youth. If you prioritize spending money on locking youth up and not providing services for them that are preventative or that provide some kind of respite from various hardships, of course you're going to see youth being locked up as young adults and then becoming locked up as adults. Judge Galvin mentioned before that the sort of progressive solution for a progressive town like Bloomington would be to build a jail. I certainly consider myself a part of the consensus that it feels like we've reached about the problem of sending youth out of the county. I would strongly disagree that the progressive solution is contributing to being fourth in the country in the number of youth we incarcerate.
I keep thinking, I don't think we're done with the planning process, and I know you hate that, Steve, but maybe there's a reason we haven't done it yet. We are a progressive community. We need to think about what's a different approach.
This seems to me deja vu all over again. We're proposing a huge facility with an enormous debt at a time when the finances of the whole country are plummeting down. We can always take out bond money. We can always borrow money for buildings. You cannot guarantee that there will be money there for staff. You cannot guarantee that there will be money there for the most important things. So what we face here, which also is the elephant in the room, is the economics of the situation. Namely, not only, it seems to me, will we not be able to pay for this given what's coming down the pike, if it's true that the people in jail, for the most part, belong to the poorest segments of the society, the people who've had the worst beginnings, then that's where our efforts should be directed. So instead of going for facilities and buildings, we need rehab clinics. Just the other day when we talked about this with Judge Todd, something he admitted, namely that the user fees make the whole institution of the jail release a joke for very many of the people because they make minimum wage and the user fee practically cancels out any money that they make. And the user fee now is going to be increased, it seems to me, with these fancy facilities. I don't know if criminal justice is ever going to be anything other than unjust until it reaches addresses head-on the fact that the people in jail, for the most part, are the poorest people.
Every time you exercise your own autonomy and creativity, you are beaten up in one way or another, or you're kept from expressing yourself. That is what happens in an orientation of punishment. The punishment is not producing positive results. Now, the possibility of our having a new jail, there are all kinds of people in this community who are against that.